The aroma of my mother's pot roast filled the dining room. As I settled into my usual chair at the polished oak table where I'd eaten Sunday lunch for 28 years, Carol had outdone herself today with fresh dinner rolls, green bean casserole, and her famous mashed potatoes that could make anyone forget their troubles. My father Robert carved the meat with practiced precision while discussing his latest fishing trip to Lake Tahoe. Everything felt perfectly normal until my mother cleared her throat and delivered the words that would shatter our family dynamic forever. "Your brother lost his job, so you'll be covering his bills for a while," she announced, with the casual tone someone might use to mention the weather. My dad added without missing a beat, "Family helps family, no complaints." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the rich Colombian blend while processing their expectation that I'd sacrifice my financial stability for Danny's irresponsibility. Setting down my mug with deliberate calm, I smiled and said, "Great. Then he can move into your house because I'm selling mine and you're about to learn exactly how your precious son has been spending the money." The silence that followed my announcement stretched across the dining room like a taut wire ready to snap. Carol's fork clattered against her plate while Robert stopped mid-chew, his weathered face contorting with confusion. Danny, who had been scrolling through his phone with typical disinterest, finally looked up with the expression of someone who just heard their own death sentence read aloud. "What money?" Carol asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew a manila folder thick with documentation. "The $1,500 I've been sending Danny every month for the past 6 months." I explained, spreading bank statements across the tablecloth between the serving dishes. Ever since he called me crying about being behind on rent and utilities, Robert's complexion drained of color as he examined the printed transfers. "Son, you never told us George was helping you financially." Danny's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words emerged. I continued methodically laying out evidence, each document a nail in the coffin of his deception. The interesting thing about Danny's sob story is that he claimed he'd just lost his job when he called me in March. But I did some digging, and his employment actually ended 8 months ago in July of last year. Carol gripped the edge of the table. "8 months, Danny. You told us you were still working at the insurance company until last month. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb 3 months ago." I continued producing photographs from the folder. These pictures show exactly how Danny's been spending the money I sent to help with his supposed financial crisis. The first photograph showed Danny at Morton's Steakhouse raising a glass of wine that cost more than most people's grocery budget for a week. The second captured him browsing luxury watches at Tiffany & Co. The third featured him loading shopping bags from Nordstrom into his BMW. "This receipt shows a $1,200 dinner at the Capitol Grill," I said, sliding the paper toward my parents. "And this one documents a weekend shopping spree in Manhattan totaling $3,000, all purchased within days of me sending him emergency money for rent." Robert studied each document with the methodical attention he'd once used reviewing construction blueprints. "Danny, please explain this." My brother finally found his voice, though it came out as a pathetic croak. "George, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. I needed to maintain appearances while job hunting. Networking requires looking successful." "Networking," I repeated flatly. "Is that what you call gambling at Atlantic City 3 weekends in a row? Because I have casino surveillance photos showing you at the blackjack tables betting $500 per hand." Carol's gasp echoed through the room. She'd raised both her sons to view gambling as a moral failing, something only desperate people with no self-control would pursue. Seeing evidence of Danny's casino visits struck her like a physical blow. The front door chimed and footsteps approached the dining room. Sarah, Danny's girlfriend of 8 months, swept in wearing a stunning emerald necklace that caught the afternoon light streaming through the bay windows. "Sorry I'm late," she chirped, kissing Danny's cheek before noticing the tense atmosphere. "Did I interrupt something important?" I gestured toward her necklace. That's beautiful, Sarah. Cartier, if I'm not mistaken. Must have cost around $2,000. Her hand instinctively moved to her throat. Danny surprised me with it last week for our anniversary. How generous of him, I said, producing another receipt, especially since he purchased it with money I'd sent him for his electric bill. The color drained from Sarah's face as she realized she'd walked into a trap. Danny grabbed her arm, whispering urgently, but the damage was already done. Robert slammed his palm against the table, making the dishes jump. Enough lies! Danny, I want the truth right now. My brother's composure crumbled like a house of cards in a windstorm. Okay, fine. I've been struggling since losing the job, and yes, I spent some of George's money on things I shouldn't have. But it's not as bad as he's making it sound. Really? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a recorded conversation. Because last month, Sarah told her friend Jessica that you called me your family ATM and that I'd never find out about your spending spree. Should I play the recording? Sarah's face went white. Danny, you promised me you hadn't said that. The weight of betrayal settled over the dining room like a suffocating blanket. Carol stared at her younger son with the expression of someone discovering a stranger wearing her child's face. Robert methodically folded his napkin, a gesture that signaled his transition from confused father to disappointed disciplinarian. How much money has George sent you in total? Robert demanded. Danny mumbled something inaudible. Speak up! Carol snapped, her maternal patience finally exhausted. $9,000. Danny admitted, his voice barely audible. I corrected him. $9,750 to be exact. Plus the additional $3,000 you convinced Sarah to borrow from her credit cards by promising you'd pay her back. Sarah stared at Danny with dawning horror. You told me that money was for your business investment? What business investment? Carol asked, her voice rising with each word. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the revelation that would expose the full scope of Danny's manipulation. But before I could deliver the final blow, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. Additional evidence ready. On my way to location. The real confrontation was just beginning. I set my phone on the table and watched Danny's face cycle through expressions of panic, calculation, and desperate hope. He was clearly trying to formulate another lie, another manipulation to wiggle out of the corner I'd backed him into, but I wasn't finished revealing the depth of his betrayal. There's something else, I announced, reaching for a second folder I'd kept hidden beneath my chair. Danny didn't just lie about losing his job recently. He's been running an elaborate con game that involves our entire family. Robert leaned forward, his contractor's instincts sensing structural damage in the foundation of their family trust. What kind of con game? I spread incorporation documents across the table, each page stamped with official state seals. 3 months ago, Danny convinced you both to take out a second mortgage on this house to invest $60,000 in his consulting business. Except there is no consulting business. Carol's hands trembled as she examined the paperwork. But we saw the business plan. Danny showed us projected earnings and client contracts. All fabricated. I explained, producing additional documentation. These incorporation papers were never filed with the state. The business license is fake. The client contracts list companies that don't exist at addresses that turn out to be empty lots or demolished buildings. Robert's face flushed red as he processed the implications. Danny, tell me you didn't forge these documents. My brother remained silent, but Sarah's shocked expression provided confirmation. She clearly knew about the fake business but hadn't realized the extent of the forgery involved. The $60,000 from your home equity loan went directly into Danny's personal checking account. I continued producing bank statements. Not into any business account because no legitimate business account exists. Carol stood abruptly, knocking over her water glass. Where is our money, Danny? I can explain everything, Danny began, but I cut him off. $30,000 went to day trading losses, I said, showing printed trading records. Danny thought he could multiply your investment quickly and pay you back before you discovered the truth. Instead, he lost everything within 6 weeks. Robert studied the trading statements with the focused intensity he'd once used to review blueprints for skyscrapers. These transactions show incredibly risky bets. Margin trading options, speculation penny stocks. The remaining $30,000 funded Danny and Sarah's lifestyle for 4 months. I explained producing credit card statements and receipts. Expensive restaurants, designer clothing weekend trips to Miami and Las Vegas. Sarah sank into her chair as if her legs could no longer support her weight. Danny, you told me your family was wealthy and happy to support your entrepreneurial ventures. We're not wealthy, Carol whispered, her voice hollow with realization. We're retired on fixed incomes. That $60,000 represents a significant portion of our life savings. I pulled out my laptop and opened a spreadsheet I'd been maintaining. Your monthly payment on the home equity loan is $847. Based on your current income, that payment will consume 32% of your monthly budget. Robert ran his hands through his graying hair. We've been eating beans and rice 3 nights a week to make those payments. I thought we were investing in Danny's future. You were investing in Danny's deception, I said bluntly. But the financial fraud is actually the least serious part of this situation. Danny finally spoke, his voice cracking with desperation. George, please don't make this worse than it already is. I'm not making anything worse, I replied. I'm revealing how much worse it already is. I opened a new folder and extracted documents that made everyone except Danny gasp audibly. 2 weeks ago, while researching Danny's fake business, I discovered he's been forging signatures on legal documents. The documents showed loan applications, business registration forms, and bank account authorizations, all bearing Robert's signature, but in handwriting that clearly didn't match his actual penmanship. Danny learned to imitate Dad's signature by practicing on old birthday cards and Christmas checks, I explained. He used forged signatures to open the business bank account, apply for additional credit lines, and authorize fund transfers. Robert compared the forged signatures to his own handwriting, his anger building with each obvious discrepancy. This is identity theft. This is criminal fraud. It gets worse, I said grimly. Danny also forged Mom's signature on documents naming him as power of attorney for financial decisions. Carol stared at the power of attorney paperwork in disbelief. I never signed this. I never even saw this document before today. With power of attorney, Danny could have accessed your retirement accounts, sold your house, or made major financial decisions without your knowledge or consent, I explained. Sarah covered her face with her hands. Oh my God, Danny, what have you done? I was trying to create opportunities for us, Danny protested weakly. I was going to pay everyone back once the business took off. What business? Robert shouted, his patience finally shattered. You just admitted there is no business. The dining room fell silent except for the ticking of my grandmother's antique clock on the mantelpiece. The same clock that had marked time for countless family gatherings, birthday celebrations, and holiday meals. Now it counted down the seconds until our family would never be the same. My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Police contacted, bringing additional evidence. ETA 10 minutes. I had been recording this entire conversation on my phone, and Danny's admissions were about to become evidence in a criminal investigation. But before I could explain that detail, Danny made one final attempt to manipulate the situation. Look, I know I made mistakes, he said, adopting the contrite tone he'd perfected since childhood. But family forgives family. We can work this out together without involving outsiders. That's when I delivered the revelation that would change everything. Actually, Danny, we can't work this out together. Because I've been recording this entire conversation, and your admissions constitute multiple felonies under federal law. The weight of my announcement settled over the room like a toxic fog. Danny's face went through a rapid transformation from confusion to understanding to pure terror. Sarah pushed her chair back from the table as if proximity to Danny might somehow implicate her in his crimes. "Recording," Carol asked, her voice barely audible. I held up my smartphone, the red recording indicator still glowing. "Everything Danny has admitted today is documented. The fake business, the forged signatures, the misappropriated funds. Under federal law, wire fraud and elder abuse carry serious penalties." Robert stood slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow across the table. "How serious?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang with an urgency that made everyone jump. Through the front window, I could see Marcus Webb approaching with a briefcase and what appeared to be an official companion. "That would be my private investigator," I announced. "And based on his text messages, he's brought additional evidence I requested." Danny bolted for the kitchen, but I'd anticipated this reaction. "I wouldn't recommend running Danny. Marcus is accompanied by Detective Amanda Torres from the County Financial Crimes Unit." Sarah's sob echoed through the dining room. "A detective, Danny? You said this was just family drama." "Sit down, son," Robert commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had once managed construction crews. "Running will only make everything worse." Marcus Webb entered first, his weathered face grim with the expression of someone delivering terrible news. Behind him walked Detective Amanda Torres, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s wearing a business suit and carrying a badge that caught the afternoon sunlight. "Mr. George Patterson," Detective Torres asked, though she clearly knew my identity from our previous conversations. "Yes, Detective, thank you for coming." She nodded toward the family gathered around the table. "Are these the individuals mentioned in your complaint?" "My parents, Robert and Carol Patterson," I confirmed. "My brother Danny Patterson and his girlfriend Sarah Martinez." Torres removed a digital recorder from her pocket. "I need to inform everyone that this conversation is being recorded for legal purposes. Mr. Danny Patterson, you have the right to remain silent." Danny's last shred of composure evaporated. "George, please, don't do this to the family." "I'm not doing anything to the family," I replied. "I'm protecting the family from what you've already done." Marcus opened his briefcase and withdrew a manila envelope thick with documents. "Detective, the additional evidence you requested." Torres accepted the envelope and began examining its contents. Her expression grew increasingly serious as she reviewed each item. "Mr. Patterson," she addressed Danny, "these documents suggest your criminal activities extend beyond your immediate family." Marcus cleared his throat. "With the detective's permission, I'll summarize our findings." Torres nodded and Marcus began laying out photographs and documents on the dining room table. The evidence painted a picture of systematic financial predation that made Danny's lies to our family seem almost minor by comparison. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Danny Patterson contacted his cousin, Bradley Patterson, in Phoenix, claiming he needed emergency medical treatment not covered by insurance. Marcus explained, showing phone records and wire transfer receipts. Bradley sent $4,000 immediately. Carol gasped. "Bradley, Danny, you told us you hadn't spoken to Bradley in years." "The medical emergency was fabricated," Marcus continued. "Mr. Danny Patterson used Bradley's personal information to apply for online payday loans totaling $7,000. Detective Torres examined the loan applications. Identity theft across state lines constitutes federal jurisdiction. "It gets worse," Marcus said grimly. "Aunt Patricia Richardson in Denver received similar emergency requests. She wired $6,000 for Danny's supposed car accident and another $2,000 for legal fees." Robert slumped into his chair. "Patricia is on a fixed income. $6,000 represents months of her Social Security payments. Uncle Walter Thompson in Sacramento lost approximately $5,000 to fabricated emergency veterinary bills for Danny's supposed injured dog." Marcus continued. "Mr. Danny Patterson doesn't own any pets." Sarah stared at Danny with growing horror. "You told me your family was wealthy and happy to help with your business venture." "They're not wealthy," Detective Torres observed. "They're retired seniors on limited incomes being systematically defrauded by a family member they trusted." Marcus produced additional evidence. Store credit applications using stolen identity information, online loan applications, with falsified employment data and attempts to access relatives' retirement account information through social engineering. Social engineering, Carol asked. Danny called your relatives pretending to be from their banks or credit card companies, Detective Torres explained. He claimed there were suspicious activities on their accounts and needed them to verify personal information for security purposes. The scope of Danny's criminal enterprise was staggering. He'd transformed family relationships into profit centers using emotional manipulation and trusted connections to fund his gambling addiction and lifestyle inflation. How many relatives has he targeted? Robert asked quietly. Marcus consulted his notes. Based on phone records and financial transactions, at least 7 family members across 4 states have been victimized to varying degrees. Detective Torres addressed Danny directly. Mr. Patterson, given the evidence presented and the interstate nature of these crimes, federal charges are likely. Wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse carry significant penalties. Danny finally found his voice, though it emerged as a strangled whisper. I can pay everyone back. I just need time. With what money? I asked pointedly. You're unemployed in debt and facing criminal charges. Your assets consist of designer clothes and jewelry purchased with stolen funds. Sarah removed the emerald necklace and placed it on the table. I didn't know, Detective. I swear I had no idea the money came from his family. Torres studied Sarah carefully. Ms. Martinez's cooperation with our investigation could influence how prosecutors view your involvement. My involvement? Sarah's voice rose to a near shriek. I'm not involved in anything. Marcus opened another envelope and withdrew bank statements and surveillance photographs. Ms. Martinez, these images show you withdrawing money from accounts opened using stolen identity information. The photographs clearly showed Sarah at various ATM locations using cards linked to accounts Danny had opened with relatives' personal information. Her claims of innocence crumbled under the weight of visual evidence. You drove me to those ATMs, Sarah accused Danny. You said the accounts were yours. The accounts were opened using Uncle Walter's social security number and Bradley's employment information, Detective Torres noted. Ms. Martinez, your participation in these withdrawals makes you an accessory to the identity theft. The dining room had transformed into an impromptu crime scene investigation. Evidence covered every surface, and the family who'd gathered for Sunday lunch now faced the destruction of relationships, finances, and legal consequences that would echo for years. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Detective Torres's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the message before addressing me directly. Mr. Patterson, I have an update from the federal task force. They're ready to move forward with the expanded investigation. Federal task force, Carol whispered. That's when I delivered the news that would change everything forever. I've been cooperating with federal investigators for 6 weeks because Danny's crimes aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a larger pattern that crosses state lines and involves multiple criminal enterprises. Detective Torres closed her phone and addressed the room with the gravity of someone delivering life-altering news. Mr. George Patterson has been working with federal authorities since discovering his brother's criminal activities extend far beyond family fraud. The silence that followed felt like the moment between lightning and thunder when the air itself holds its breath. Carol gripped Robert's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white, while Danny appeared to shrink into his chair as if trying to disappear entirely. Federal authorities, Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. FBI Special Agent Catherine Hayes will be joining us shortly. Torres explained. Mr. Danny Patterson's activities match patterns they've been investigating across multiple states. As if summoned by her name, the front door opened and a woman in her late 30s entered, followed by 2 additional agents. Special Agent Hayes possessed the commanding presence of someone accustomed to delivering devastating news to families who thought they knew their loved ones. Mrs. Patterson. Mr. Patterson. Hayes addressed my parents with professional courtesy before turning to Danny. Mr. Danny Patterson, I'm Special Agent Hayes with the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force. You're wanted in connection with identity theft cases involving 3 additional family members beyond those already discussed. Sarah's strangled sob filled the room. 3 more. Hayes opened a tablet and began reading from official reports. Cousin Bradley Patterson filed federal charges after discovering fraudulent loan applications using his employment information and Social Security number. The loans defaulted, damaging his credit score by 200 points and jeopardizing his security clearance with his defense contractor employer. Robert's face went ashen. Bradley works on classified military projects. A damaged security clearance could end his career. Aunt Patricia Richardson reported $8,000 in unauthorized charges on credit cards opened using her personal information. Hayes continued. The fraudulent accounts remained undetected for months, accruing interest and penalties that exceeded the original theft amount. Carol covered her mouth with her hands. Patricia lives on $900 monthly Social Security. $8,000 represents nearly a year's income. Uncle Walter Thompson discovered his excellent credit rating had been destroyed by defaulted store credit accounts he never opened, Hayes read from her tablet. The fraudulent accounts were used to purchase luxury goods that were subsequently sold online for cash. Marcus Webb interjected with additional documentation. The online sales generated approximately $15,000 in untraceable income that funded Mr. Danny Patterson's gambling activities. Hayes studied Danny with the clinical assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating criminal behavior. Mr. Patterson, your systematic exploitation of elderly family members constitutes elder abuse under federal statutes. Combined with wire fraud, mail fraud, and identity theft across state lines, you're facing potential sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years in federal prison. Danny's face crumpled as the reality of his situation crystallized. I never meant to hurt anyone. I thought I could pay everyone back once I got lucky at the casino. Gambling addiction doesn't excuse criminal behavior, Hayes replied without sympathy. Federal prosecutors take elder abuse particularly seriously, especially when perpetrated by trusted family members. Sarah attempted to distance herself from the expanding investigation. Agent Hayes, I had no knowledge of Danny's activities involving his relatives. I only knew about the money from George. Hayes consulted her tablet. Ms. Martinez, you're documented as participating in withdrawals from fraudulent accounts, accepting expensive gifts purchased with stolen funds, and recruiting additional victims through social media connections. Recruiting victims? Carol asked, her voice rising with alarm. Ms. Martinez contacted several of Danny's female cousins on social media, suggesting they could earn easy money by allowing Danny to use their personal information for what she described as temporary business loans. Hayes explained. The evidence revealed Sarah as an active participant rather than an innocent victim. Her nursing school background had provided knowledge of how to exploit elderly individuals' medical concerns, making her particularly effective at manipulating Danny's older relatives. I was trying to help Danny succeed, Sarah protested weakly. You were committing federal crimes, Hayes corrected. Your participation in this conspiracy makes you eligible for prosecution under RICO statutes designed to combat organized criminal enterprises. Detective Torres addressed my parents directly. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, your cooperation with this investigation could help protect other families from similar victimization. Robert straightened in his chair, his contractor's instincts recognizing the importance of structural integrity. What kind of cooperation? Testifying about Danny's manipulation techniques, providing documentation of fraudulent communications, and helping us understand how he gained access to family financial information. Hayes explained. Carol looked at Danny with the expression of someone recognizing a stranger wearing her son's face. How did you get Uncle Walter's Social Security number? Danny's confession came in halting, shame-filled sentences. I memorized everyone's personal information during family gatherings. Birthdays, Social Security numbers, maiden names. People share that information casually during conversations about retirement benefits or tax preparation. You weaponized family intimacy, Robert said with quiet devastation. Hayes nodded grimly. Family-based financial crimes are particularly destructive because they exploit emotional bonds and social trust. Victims often delay reporting because they hope family loyalty will resolve the situation privately. Marcus Webb provided additional context. Mr. Danny Patterson researched his relatives' financial vulnerabilities before contacting them. He knew Bradley's security clearance review schedule, Patricia's medical expenses, and Walter's recent retirement transition. The systematic nature of Danny's predation was staggering. He'd transformed family relationships into intelligence-gathering opportunities, collecting personal information that he later weaponized for financial gain. Agent Hayes, I said, there's something else you should know about Danny's future plans. Hayes looked up from her tablet. What information do you have? I produced my final piece of evidence, a recorded phone conversation from 2 weeks earlier. Danny contacted my employer's human resources department, attempting to access my salary information and employment benefits data. The recording revealed Danny's plan to forge my signature on loan applications using my employment information as collateral. He'd intended to steal my identity just as systematically as he'd victimized our relatives. Identity theft of a federal witness constitutes obstruction of justice, Hayes noted. That charge alone carries an additional 5-year sentence. Sarah stared at Danny with dawning horror. You were going to steal from George too after everything he's done for you. I was desperate, Danny whispered. The gambling debts were growing faster than I could manage. Gambling debts, Torres asked sharply. That's when Marcus delivered the revelation that would expose the most dangerous aspect of Danny's situation. Mr. Danny Patterson owes $45,000 to Vincent Torino, a loan shark with connections to organized crime families in Atlantic City. Marcus explained producing surveillance photographs. The debt carries 20% weekly interest, and Torino has been pressuring Danny for payment through increasingly aggressive methods. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Danny hadn't just been stealing from family to fund a lifestyle. He'd been stealing to avoid physical violence from professional criminals who wouldn't hesitate to extend their threats to his relatives. Torino's organization has a history of targeting family members when debtors default, Hayes said grimly. Your parents could be in physical danger because of Danny's gambling debts. The dining room fell silent as everyone processed this terrifying new dimension to Danny's crimes. He hadn't just betrayed their trust and stolen their money. He'd potentially exposed the entire family to violence from dangerous criminals. But Agent Hayes had one more surprise for us. Mr. George Patterson, I need to inform you that Danny attempted to contact you last night, but was intercepted by our surveillance team. He's been released on federal bond with strict conditions, including no contact with family members or witnesses. Released? Carol asked in alarm. Temporarily, Hayes clarified. But his bond conditions are about to be violated, which means he'll be returning to federal custody very soon. Special Agent Hayes opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick file that seemed to contain enough evidence to prosecute a small army. The weight of federal investigation had transformed our family's Sunday lunch into something resembling a congressional hearing, complete with documentation that would determine the trajectory of multiple lives. Mr. Patterson, Hayes addressed me directly. Your cooperation over the past 6 weeks has been instrumental in uncovering a criminal network that extends far beyond your brother's individual actions. Carol's grip on Robert's hand tightened. Criminal network? Danny's activities fit a pattern we've been tracking across multiple states. Hayes explained, spreading photographs and documents across the dining room table. Family-based financial crimes following specific methodologies that suggest coordination or shared training. The photographs showed various individuals at casinos, upscale restaurants, and luxury shopping venues. Some faces were familiar family members. Others were complete strangers who'd apparently been living similar lifestyles funded by fraud. Sarah Martinez isn't Danny's first girlfriend. Hayes continued producing social media screenshots and dating profiles. Over the past 3 years, she's been in relationships with wealthy men from established families in Connecticut, Virginia, and now Pennsylvania. Sarah's face went white as her carefully constructed innocence crumbled under federal scrutiny. Those relationships ended naturally. I had no ulterior motives. Hayes consulted her tablet. Each relationship followed an identical pattern: expensive gifts, luxury vacations, and eventually financial support for fabricated emergencies or business ventures. Combined damages across all relationships exceed $200,000. The scope of Sarah's criminal enterprise dwarfed even Danny's family fraud. She'd been operating a sophisticated long-term con game, targeting emotionally vulnerable men from wealthy families and systematically draining their resources. "How did Danny meet Sarah?" Robert asked quietly. Marcus Webb opened his laptop and displayed screenshots from online forums. Through a website called Family Wealth Network, which purports to offer financial advice for people from established families. In reality, it's a recruitment platform where con artists share information about potential targets. The forum screenshots revealed discussions about identifying vulnerable family members, researching family financial structures, and coordinating multi-person cons. Danny had been both student and teacher in this criminal education network. Danny provided detailed information about your family's financial situation to other forum members. Hayes explained showing printouts of forum posts, bank account balances, property values, investment portfolios, and personal vulnerabilities. Carol stared at the forum posts with growing horror. "He shared our private financial information with strangers. Your social security numbers, banking relationships, credit card information, and retirement account details," Hayes confirmed. This information was used by other forum members to target elderly individuals with similar financial profiles across multiple states. The revelation transformed Danny's crimes from family betrayal into something approaching domestic terrorism. He'd weaponized intimate family knowledge to enable criminal enterprises targeting vulnerable seniors nationwide. "Agent Hayes," I said, "I need to share information about Danny's planned defense strategy." Hayes looked up sharply. "What defense strategy?" His cellmate at the county detention facility contacted me yesterday. I explained producing recorded phone conversations. Danny plans to claim mental illness and gambling addiction as mitigating factors. He expects the family to provide character testimony supporting his psychological defense. The recorded conversations revealed Danny's continued manipulation attempts even from jail. He'd convinced his cellmate to contact family members with sob stories about Danny's supposed mental breakdown and desperate need for family support. Continued manipulation of family members violates his bond conditions, Hayes noted. This evidence will support our motion to revoke his pre-trial release. Sarah attempted one final manipulation. "Agent Hayes, I'm willing to testify against Danny in exchange for immunity. I can provide information about other victims and criminal associates." Hayes studied Sarah with the expression of someone evaluating a broken tool. "Ms. Martinez, your value as a witness is compromised by your extensive criminal history. Federal prosecutors prefer witnesses whose testimony won't be discredited by defense attorneys." Marcus Webb interjected with additional evidence. "Ms. Martinez's cooperation may be irrelevant. We have sufficient documentation and recorded conversations to prosecute successfully without relying on accomplice testimony." The mountain of evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, surveillance footage, recorded phone calls, forum screenshots, and witness statements created an irrefutable narrative of systematic criminal enterprise. "What happens next?" Carol asked, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "Danny will be arrested on federal charges within 48 hours, Hayes explained. "Sarah faces separate prosecution for her role in the conspiracy. Your family will be protected through federal victim assistance programs. Robert stirred for the first time in minutes. Protected? How? Your home equity loan qualifies for emergency relief through federal victim restitution programs, Hayes said. The government can freeze your loan payments while pursuing asset recovery from the perpetrators. The prospect of financial relief provided the first glimmer of hope in hours of devastating revelations. My parents had been facing potential foreclosure. Federal protection might save their home. Additionally, Hayes continued, your cooperation with this investigation will be considered favorably when prosecutors determine restitution amounts from recovered assets. Marcus Webb provided practical details. Luxury items purchased with stolen funds will be seized and sold with proceeds returned to victims. Sarah's emerald necklace, Danny's watch collection, and other high-value purchases will be liquidated. The jewelry and designer goods scattered around the dining room represented more than stolen money. They were evidence of betrayed trust and shattered family bonds that no amount of restitution could repair. Agent Hayes, I said, there's one more thing you should know about my cooperation with this investigation. What additional information do you have? I pulled out my laptop and opened encrypted files I'd been maintaining throughout the investigation. I planted false information about family financial assets to track how Danny was sharing our personal data with criminal associates. The files contained fabricated bank statements, fake investment portfolios, and fictional business ventures I'd claimed to be developing. By monitoring how this false information spread through criminal networks, federal investigators had identified additional targets and criminal enterprises. Your counterintelligence work helped us map the entire criminal network, Hayes acknowledged. We've identified 47 individuals across 12 states participating in family-based financial fraud. The scope of the investigation dwarfed anything I'd imagined when I first discovered Danny's lies. What began as concern about my brother's dishonesty had uncovered a nationwide criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable families. But our confrontation wasn't over yet. Mr. Patterson, Hayes addressed me, I need to warn you that Danny has violated his bond conditions multiple times since his release yesterday. He's been attempting to contact family members and criminal associates despite court orders prohibiting such communication. What kind of contact attempts? Robert asked. Phone calls, text messages, and social media communications, Hayes replied. He's also been observed near George's workplace and this residence. The realization that Danny had been stalking his own family sent chills through the dining room. Federal bond conditions existed to protect witnesses and victims, but Danny's continued manipulation attempts suggested he remained dangerous despite facing serious legal consequences. We have surveillance teams monitoring Danny's activities, Hayes assured us. But I recommend additional security precautions until he's returned to federal custody. That's when Detective Torres received a radio transmission that changed everything. Agent Hayes, we have a situation. Danny Patterson has been arrested attempting to break into George Patterson's apartment. The radio crackled with urgent communications as Detective Torres coordinated with patrol units responding to Danny's arrest. Agent Hayes immediately began making phone calls to federal marshals, while my parents sat in stunned silence, processing the reality that their son had escalated from financial fraud to potential breaking and entering. What was he doing at your apartment? Carol asked, her voice barely audible. Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly widow who'd become like a grandmother to me over the past 5 years. George, thank goodness you answered, she said breathlessly. There was a man trying to get into your apartment. He told the police he was your brother and had permission to be there. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, Mrs. Chen. Did he say anything else? He kept talking about needing to get important documents before someone else found them, she replied. The police asked him to prove he had permission and he became very aggressive. Agent Hayes gestured for me to put the call on speaker so everyone could hear Mrs. Chen's account. He started yelling about family loyalty and how you were ruining his life, Mrs. Chen continued. When the police told him to leave, he tried to force your door open with some kind of tool. The image of Danny attempting to break into my home filled me with a mixture of anger and sadness. The brother who'd once helped me move into that apartment was now trying to burglarize it. Mrs. Chen, did he take anything or damage the door? The door's fine, but he dropped a backpack when the police arrested him. It fell open and papers scattered everywhere. Agent Hayes leaned forward. What kind of papers? Credit card applications, bank forms, and what looked like identification cards with different names, Mrs. Chen replied. The police collected everything as evidence. After ending the call, Hayes explained the implications of Danny's arrest. Attempted burglary while on federal bond constitutes a serious violation. Combined with possession of fraudulent identification documents, he's facing additional federal charges. Sarah, who'd been silent during the phone conversation, suddenly spoke up. He was looking for George's personal documents, bank statements, tax returns, anything he could use to apply for credit cards or loans. How do you know that? Detective Torres asked sharply. Because he tried the same thing at his cousin Bradley's house last month, Sarah admitted. Danny said family members never suspect relatives of stealing mail or going through personal files. The revelation that Danny had been burglarizing family members' homes added a terrifying new dimension to his criminal activities. He'd progressed from emotional manipulation to actual breaking and entering. What else did Danny steal from family members? Agent Hayes demanded. Sarah's resistance finally crumbled under federal scrutiny. He has copies of everyone's driver's licenses, social security cards, and birth certificates. He photographed documents during family gatherings when people left their purses or wallets unattended. Robert slammed his fist on the table. That's why he always offered to help collect coats and purses during holiday parties. He also installed tracking software on relatives' phones when they asked him for technical help, Sarah continued. The software recorded text messages and phone calls containing financial information. The systematic nature of Danny's intelligence gathering was staggering. He transformed every family interaction into a data collection opportunity, treating relatives like targets rather than loved ones. Sarah, Hayes said, your cooperation in revealing these activities will be noted in our report to federal prosecutors. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. George, this is Danny's cellmate Marcus. He asked me to tell you he's sorry and wants to make things right. Can you visit him at county lockup? I showed the message to Agent Hayes, who immediately recognized it as another manipulation attempt. Danny is prohibited from contacting family members through intermediaries, she explained. This message constitutes another bond violation. The pattern was clear, even facing serious federal charges. Danny continued attempting to manipulate family members through increasingly desperate schemes. Jail had not reformed his behavior. It had simply forced him to develop more creative manipulation techniques. Agent Hayes, Carol said quietly, I need to ask you something difficult. What is it, Mrs. Patterson? Is there any possibility that Danny is mentally ill? That his behavior represents some kind of psychological breakdown rather than deliberate criminal intent? Hayes had clearly encountered this question before. Mrs. Patterson, we've had Danny evaluated by federal psychologists. He demonstrates clear understanding of right and wrong, shows deliberate planning in his criminal activities, and attempts to manipulate evaluation sessions through fabricated symptoms. He's not mentally ill, Robert said with quiet certainty. He's morally bankrupt. The distinction was important. Mental illness might explain irrational behavior, but Danny's crimes showed careful planning, systematic execution, and sophisticated understanding of legal and financial systems. Dr. Jennifer Murphy, the federal psychologist who evaluated Danny, concluded that he suffers from antisocial personality disorder, Hayes explained. This condition involves disregard for social norms and the rights of others, but it doesn't constitute legal insanity. Sarah looked up sharply. Danny told me he was seeing a therapist for gambling addiction. He attended 2 court-ordered counseling sessions and then stopped participating, Hayes replied. The therapist reported that Danny showed no genuine interest in addressing his gambling behavior. Even Danny's supposed attempts at rehabilitation had been manipulative performances designed to create false impressions of reform and accountability. "What happens to our family now?" Carol asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "The immediate priority is ensuring your safety," Hayes replied. Danny's escalating behavior suggests he may attempt additional contact or harassment. Detective Torres provided practical recommendations. "Change your locks, install security cameras, and notify us immediately if Danny attempts any contact through intermediaries." Robert nodded grimly. "We'll do whatever is necessary to protect ourselves." "The Federal Victim Assistance Program will help you access counseling services," Hayes added. "Family-based crimes often require specialized therapy to address the unique trauma of betrayal by loved ones." The prospect of therapy felt both necessary and overwhelming. "How do you process the discovery that someone you've loved and supported for decades has been systematically exploiting that love for criminal purposes?" "Agent Hayes," I said, "what's the timeline for Danny's trial?" "Federal cases typically take 12 to 18 months to reach trial," she replied. However, given the extensive evidence and Danny's continued criminal behavior while on bond, prosecutors may seek an expedited timeline. My phone rang again, this time showing a call from the county detention facility. Agent Hayes immediately signaled for me not to answer. "That's likely another manipulation attempt," she explained. "Danny has been coaching other inmates to make calls on his behalf." The call went to voicemail, and minutes later I received a desperate message. "George, please help me. I'm scared and alone. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your brother. Don't let them destroy our family." Even from jail, Danny continued exploiting emotional manipulation techniques that had been successful throughout his life. But this time his audience understood the performance. "He recorded that message specifically to guilt trip you into dropping charges," Hayes observed. Federal prosecutors encounter these manipulation attempts frequently in family-based crimes. Carol listened to the voicemail with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sympathy, but tears of grief for the son she'd thought she knew. "That's not my son speaking," she said quietly. "That's a stranger wearing my son's voice." The realization marked a turning point in her emotional journey. Danny's manipulation had finally become transparent, allowing her to see his behavior clearly, rather than through the lens of maternal love. Agent Hayes received a phone call and stepped aside for a brief conversation before returning with significant news. "Danny has been charged with federal bond violations and will remain in custody until trial," she announced. "His bond has been permanently revoked." The news provided relief mixed with sadness. Danny would no longer pose a physical threat to the family, but his imprisonment represented the complete destruction of relationships that had once been central to our family identity. "There's one more thing," Hayes said. "Federal prosecutors want to offer Danny a plea agreement that would reduce his sentence in exchange for cooperation against the criminal network he was involved with." "What kind of cooperation?" Robert asked. "Testimony against Sarah Martinez and other criminal associates' assistance in recovering stolen assets and information about additional victims across multiple states." The prospect of Danny's cooperation created a complex emotional situation. His testimony might help other families recover stolen money and achieve justice, but it would also require reliving the trauma of his betrayal through months of legal proceedings. "The decision about accepting a plea agreement is entirely Danny's choice," Hayes explained. "But his cooperation could significantly reduce sentences for all defendants involved." As federal agents and local police prepared to leave, Agent Hayes provided final instructions. "We'll need formal statements from each of you for the federal case," she said. "Victim impact statements will be particularly important during sentencing hearings." The dining room slowly returned to quiet as officials packed their evidence and departed. The Sunday lunch that had started with pot roast and casual conversation had transformed into a federal criminal investigation that would reshape our family forever. But the story wasn't over yet. Danny still had to face trial, Sarah's prosecution remained pending, and our family had to begin the long process of healing from betrayal by someone we'd loved and trusted completely. 8 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse wearing my best Navy suit, watching Danny shuffle into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. The brother who'd once stood beside me at family weddings and graduation ceremonies now avoided eye contact, while federal marshals guided him to the defendant's table. Judge Patricia Williams presided over the sentencing hearing with the stern dignity of someone who'd witnessed countless families destroyed by financial crimes. The prosecution and defense had presented their arguments over 3 days of testimony, and today would determine Danny's fate. Mr. Daniel Patterson, Judge Williams addressed my brother, "You have been convicted on 17 federal counts, including wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Before I impose sentence, do you wish to make a statement to the court?" Danny stood slowly, his lawyer whispering final instructions. For a moment, he looked like the younger brother I'd once protected from playground bullies and helped with homework. Then he spoke, and the illusion shattered. "Your Honor, I take full responsibility for my actions and the pain I've caused my family and other victims." He began reading from prepared remarks. "My gambling addiction clouded my judgment and led me to make terrible decisions that hurt the people I love most." Even in his final moments before sentencing, Danny couldn't resist manipulation. His statement contained no genuine accountability, only carefully crafted language designed to minimize his culpability and generate sympathy. Judge Williams wasn't impressed. "Mr. Patterson, your crimes demonstrate systematic predation against vulnerable family members over an extended period. This court has reviewed psychological evaluations indicating your behavior was calculated rather than impulsive." The prosecution had presented overwhelming evidence during the trial. Marcus Webb testified about Danny's sophisticated planning and intelligence gathering. Agent Hayes explained the broader criminal network Danny had participated in. Bradley Patricia and Walter provided heartbreaking victim impact statements describing the financial and emotional devastation of his betrayal. "Your gambling addiction doesn't excuse identity theft, elder abuse, or conspiracy," Judge Williams continued. "These crimes required deliberate planning and callous disregard for your victim's welfare." Sarah Martinez had been sentenced 2 weeks earlier after accepting a plea agreement. Her cooperation provided testimony about the criminal network, but couldn't undo the damage she'd helped facilitate. She received 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay restitution to victims across multiple states. "Mr. Patterson," Judge Williams said, "the federal sentencing guidelines recommend 12 to 15 years imprisonment. However, given the scope of your crimes, your violation of pretrial bond conditions, and your lack of genuine remorse, this court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison." Carol gripped my hand as the sentence was pronounced. 18 years meant Danny would be 46, when released assuming good behavior and full sentence completion. The brother we'd known was effectively gone, replaced by a stranger who'd prioritized gambling and luxury over family relationships. Additionally, Judge Williams continued, "You are ordered to pay restitution totaling $237,000 to 23 verified victims across 6 states. The restitution amount represented money that would likely never be recovered. Danny had no assets, no income, and no realistic prospects for earning legitimate money while incarcerated. The court order provided legal acknowledgement of damages, but little hope for actual compensation. As federal marshals led Danny away, he finally looked toward the gallery where our family sat. His expression contained no remorse, only resentment at being held accountable for his choices. The glimpse behind his mask revealed someone who still viewed himself as the victim of unfair prosecution rather than the perpetrator of systematic fraud. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Williams left the bench. Outside the courthouse, Agent Hayes provided updates on the broader investigation. Danny's cooperation helped us prosecute 12 other defendants involved in family-based financial crimes. The network he participated in victimized over 200 families nationwide. The scope of the criminal enterprise remained staggering, even months after our initial discovery. Danny's individual crimes were horrific enough, but they represented just one component of a sophisticated network targeting vulnerable families across the country. What about asset recovery? Robert asked. Seized luxury goods generated approximately $40,000 in restitution funds, Hayes replied. Combined with Sarah Martinez's assets, total recovery reached $65,000 distributed among victims based on their losses. The financial recovery represented a fraction of actual damages, but it provided symbolic acknowledgement of the harm Danny had caused. More importantly, it demonstrated that criminal behavior carried real consequences rather than empty threats. Agent Hayes, Carol said, I want to thank you for treating our family with dignity throughout this process. Mrs. Patterson investigating family-based crimes requires understanding the unique trauma involved, Hayes replied. Your courage in supporting prosecution helped protect other families from similar victimization. The trial had required months of testimony document review and emotional preparation. But the legal process had also provided structure for processing the betrayal and beginning to rebuild trust in relationships. Dr. Jennifer Murphy, the family therapist we'd been working with since Danny's arrest, met us at a quiet restaurant near the courthouse. The therapy sessions had helped us understand manipulation dynamics, establish healthy boundaries, and process complex emotions about loving someone who'd systematically exploited that love. How are you feeling about the sentencing? Dr. Murphy asked. Relief. Carol answered immediately. For months, I worried that Danny might receive a light sentence and continue manipulating our family. 18 years provides time for us to heal without fearing additional victimization. Robert nodded agreement. Justice was served. Danny's victims can move forward knowing he's being held accountable. The therapy sessions had been crucial for understanding that we weren't responsible for Danny's choices or required to maintain relationships with someone who demonstrated contempt for our welfare. Family loyalty didn't mean enabling criminal behavior. Giorgio Dr. Murphy asked, what have you learned from this experience? That protecting people you love sometimes requires difficult decisions, I replied. Exposing Danny's crimes wasn't betraying family. It was protecting family from someone who'd already betrayed us. The investigation had revealed the difference between genuine family support and enabling destructive behavior. Real love sometimes requires saying no, establishing boundaries, and allowing consequences to occur naturally. 6 months after the sentencing, our family had established new routines and relationships. Carol and Robert attended financial literacy classes, learning to protect themselves from future manipulation. They'd paid off their home equity loan through victim assistance programs and established emergency savings for genuine crises. I received a letter from Danny last week. Carol mentioned during one of our monthly family dinners. What did it say, I asked. He's participating in prison education programs and claims he's learned from his mistakes, she replied. But Dr. Murphy helped me understand that his words don't require any response from us. The letter represented another manipulation attempt designed to guilt family members into resuming contact and financial support. But Carol had developed the emotional tools necessary to recognize manipulation without being affected by it. Are you considering responding? Robert asked. No, Carol said firmly. Danny destroyed our relationship through his choices. Any future relationship would require genuine accountability and changed behavior demonstrated over years, not months. The decision represented enormous personal growth. Carol had transformed from an enabling mother into someone capable of maintaining healthy boundaries despite emotional manipulation. 3 years after Danny's sentencing, I received unexpected news. Bradley called to tell me that Danny had written letters to multiple family members acknowledging his manipulation and expressing genuine remorse for the pain he'd caused. The letters are different, Bradley explained. They don't ask for anything or try to justify his behavior. They just acknowledge what he did and apologize. I read Danny's letter to me with cautious skepticism. The language was simpler, more direct, and contained specific acknowledgments of harm rather than vague expressions of regret. George, the letter read, "I understand that my actions destroyed our relationship and hurt people I claim to love. I don't expect forgiveness or contact from anyone. I'm writing only to acknowledge the truth about my choices and their consequences. You protected our family when I was attacking it. I hope you can find peace knowing you did the right thing." Dr. Murphy helped me process the letter during our occasional maintenance sessions. This language pattern suggests genuine accountability rather than manipulation, she observed. But accountability doesn't automatically restore relationships. The question of forgiveness was complex. Danny had demonstrated capacity for change through his prison programs and letters, but forgiveness didn't require resuming contact or financial support. It simply meant releasing anger and resentment for our own emotional health. "What do you want to do about the letter?" Dr. Murphy asked. "Nothing immediately," I replied. "If Danny continues demonstrating changed behavior over several years, I might consider limited contact. But our family's safety and emotional health remain the priority." 5 years after the sentencing, I made my first visit to see Danny in federal prison. He looked older, calmer, and somehow smaller than the manipulative person who'd been led away in shackles. We spoke for 90 minutes about his therapy education programs, an understanding of the damage he'd caused. "I don't expect you to trust me," Danny said, as our visit concluded. "But I want you to know that I finally understand what I did to our family. The gambling was just an excuse. I made deliberate choices to hurt people who loved me." The conversation provided closure rather than reconciliation. Danny had developed genuine insight into his behavior, but 18 years of consequences couldn't be erased by personal growth. Trust required consistent demonstration over time, not heartfelt conversations. "Will you be maintaining contact?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I replied honestly. "That decision will depend on your continued growth and our family's emotional needs." Today, 7 years after that Sunday lunch revelation, our family has found peace. Carol and Robert enjoy their retirement without financial stress or fear of manipulation. They've established relationships with grandchildren through my marriage and learned to trust their instincts about emotional manipulation. I've built a life focused on healthy relationships and clear boundaries. The experience taught me that love without boundaries becomes enabling, and that protecting people sometimes requires difficult decisions that feel like betrayal. Danny remains incarcerated with 11 years remaining on his sentence. His letters continue to demonstrate personal growth and genuine accountability. Whether that growth will translate into trustworthy behavior upon release remains to be seen. The most important lesson from this experience is that family relationships require mutual respect and accountability. Blood relationships don't excuse criminal behavior or obligate victims to maintain contact with people who've demonstrated contempt for their welfare. Justice was served not only through Danny's imprisonment, but through our family's recovery of emotional health and financial security. We learned to recognize manipulation, establish boundaries, and prioritize genuine love over obligation disguised as loyalty. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires making decisions that others might view as betrayal. But real betrayal occurred when Danny chose to exploit family relationships for personal gain. My choice to expose his crimes protected vulnerable family members from continued victimization. The dining room where this story began now hosts monthly family gatherings filled with honest conversation, genuine support, and healthy relationships. The table that once witnessed devastating revelations now serves as the foundation for rebuilt trust and authentic connection. I want to ask all of you watching this story, have you ever faced a situation where protecting someone you love required making a decision that others might view as betrayal? How do you balance family loyalty with personal boundaries when someone close to you is causing harm? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if you found the story meaningful. Subscribe for more stories about family relationships and personal growth, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding the difference between enabling and genuine support. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that real love sometimes requires the courage to say no. Take care of yourselves and each other,